I'm Annika Jackson here with another episode of Your Brand Amplified. And today we have Erin Ollila on, who has a podcast also and is an expert at SEO. Erin, please tell us how you got to this part of your journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. My journey has been, in some ways, a very straight line, but I think the best way to call it is a very wavy straight line. As a kid, I knew I wanted to be everything. I wanted to be the president. I went to a Catholic school as a child, so I also wanted to be a priest, which was just a dead end road for me. That was not going to happen. I wanted to be an astronaut, but the one constant has always been that I wanted to do teaching and I wanted to be a writer. And that's, stayed through. I got my undergraduate in English language arts. I went to graduate school and got an MFA in creative nonfiction. And I kind of imagined that I would be teaching university level creative writing. Like that was the big goal. But if anyone knows anything about teaching in the college level, they know that you may be able to easily get in as an adjunct, but one, adjunct jobs pay nothing. They
Yeah.
offer no benefits. And, you kind of hop around a lot to different universities. Um, I didn't want to do that. And I decided that I was just going to forge my own way in the writing world. After getting my MFA, solely on the fact that I did not know what I would be doing and how I would stay attached to the writing world. At the time, I had been working in human resources for a long time, over a decade at that time.
Mm.
So I knew I was going back into admin like work. So my friend from the graduate school and I decided we were just going to start our own literary journal. So we did. We started an online literary journal. We actually just published our 14th issue maybe 2 weeks ago,
Amazing.
which is fun and it was wonderful. But I just, now that I'm older, I look back at that like young Erin and I think to myself, like, how cute is that I just said, like, oh, okay, let me just go and start an online literary journal. And then I did it, right? So after some time, I realized like I could stay in HR forever, but this is not what I want to do. This is not what I just paid all of that money for and trained for so long in graduate school. So I was very fortunate to find a job working in the marketing field, writing content for businesses. And I loved the idea because personal blogging was very big back then. This was a little over a decade ago, and people were writing their own blogs, but it was really kind of newer to have small to medium businesses write blogs for their business.
Yeah.
And that's where I really learned all of my SEO. I worked with great individuals who had been trained on it for a while. They really put an effort in to train me, to do it as well. And it was just fun. And I stayed there until I decided it was ready for me to like spread my wings and go off into the world and do it myself.
Mm.
At the time I started my business, I was fortunate to be aligned with some agencies and bigger brands who are looking for content writers. So I jumped right into the brand content. I worked for businesses that were, multi-million dollar businesses, Fortune 100 businesses, and created content for them that was more educational. And I loved that because it was kind of like tying those two things I wanted from the beginning, right? Like, how do I like teach people important things while also using those marketing skills to like attract them?
Yeah.
And I did it for a while until I realized that as much as I loved it and I loved the company as I was working with, it was more like I was a freelancer because I was working on their schedules. At the time of starting my own business, and a few years past, I was also having my own children. So I think anyone who is having babies in their house knows that like you're really on the baby
Yeah,
schedule. You're
absolutely.
not on the brand schedule. And it worked. I loved it. But what I did was I shifted my business slightly because I understood what it was like to be a small business. I wanted to be able to help small business owners with those same skills that I've been put in practice for, over 5 years working with huge brands. So I took those SEO skills, took those writing skills, and brought them more into web development. So, like creating websites for people, even some blog campaigns and things like that. But basically, how can we attract ideal leads to the tiny businesses? In a way that those people are really actually interested to work with them. So that is the whole wavy straight line from elementary school days of thinking I would be teaching and writing Babysitters Club books to midlife copywriting business.
I love it. I also wanted to be the president, an astronaut, an author. Um, let's see, what else did I want to be? I didn't want to be a priest, but other than that, a lot.
I'm really glad that it didn't turn out that I
Yeah.
ended up being a priest. I'll be honest with you. I was definitely an ambitious child, but if there's anything that I could be blessed with not being, it is that. So it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, and then now I find myself in a space where I use my marketing and PR background to help same small businesses, which are really, I mean, they're the backbone of our country. It's the biggest growth sector, and small to medium sized business actually could mean a lot of things. I mean, that can mean a really, 6, 7 figure and beyond business. So I know one of the things that is most important is the website, and I'm working on my newest website right now, and I find blocks. And so, how do you take somebody through the process of understanding what their copy needs to say about them on their
Yeah.
website and how that ties into their SEO?
Yeah, no, that is such a great question. And I think the best way to quickly answer is start at the end. I would almost always recommend to my clients that we don't focus on SEO first,
Mm.
that we have a general idea of what we want to rank for. And then we put that aside completely until we have the message clear. The reason we do that is because if you started with SEO research, you're going to be researching on what you think your client wants, what you think your client is going to search for. And very often I find that those things could be slightly different from what you
Mm.
expect. As an example, a client that I worked with at the beginning of the summer is a coach for young adults, specifically around the age of when they're applying to college or already in college.
Mhm.
And just in conversation with her, she had mentioned, like, I think I want to be titled something certified coach. But what we found was after writing all the messaging, after being very clear who we were targeting and what kinds of needs that those clients had, we found that there was a massive amount of search, like intent and request for people who are searching for teenage life coach or
Oh.
like college life coach. And she would have never articulated herself as a life coach because she went through a specific training program. And I just I presented that to her, like, here's the search intent for whatever term we had originally come up with, and here's the search intent for like life coach for teenagers, whichever the specific keywords were. And she was fine to be called like a life coach for teenagers, because what she was doing was helping them determine, like, what types of schools do I want to apply for? Like, how would I like to be involved when I'm in school? What types of internships would help me get a career
Mm.
that I want later? So it was very much life skills for them. It wasn't super specific. And I mean, wouldn't you want the better keyword, right? Like, because that brings the right people in because they're already searching for you. So I guess have an idea of what you'd be looking to rank for, then put it aside and you're going to jump into your messaging. And really, when it comes to a messaging strategy for your website, you want to do a couple things. You want to do competitor research, client research, and then know your own business, which sounds silly, but sometimes I think that's one of the hardest things, especially when you're DIYing your content,
Yep.
because we all have an idea. I also just rewrote my copy on my website as well. We all have an idea of what our business is, and we can articulate that in conversation. We just know it, but then putting it on paper is very hard
Mhm.
because what's in our head is how we want our business to be showcased. But then when it lives on the internet, it lives on a document. There's a perfectionist level that comes in to say, like, well, no, I don't think that would attract people, or,
Mm.
oh, I'm not saying it good enough. And some of that's mindset, some of it's being too close to the copy in general. But if you know your business, meaning you know how you like to onboard your clients, what the process looks like, what exactly the deliverables are if you happen to be a service based business, or how exactly the products would benefit those clients. It's so much easier to write out what you want to say because you have such a good grasp on what it is that you do or offer. So it sounds simple, but yes, know who you are in business and then go do the client and competitor research. If possible, doing client research, I'd always suggest people do what's called voice of customer research.
Mhm.
And that's interviewing your own customers or customers who have purchased from competitors, let's say, about what it is that they're looking for, what their needs are. And you do that so that you can make sure your offer is valid and needed by them, but you're also doing it to find out how they phrase things, and
Mm.
that helps inform the copy. When it comes to competitor research, it's a tricky thing to do on your own because you really want to know what your industry is doing and
Mhm.
saying, but you don't want to blend in with your industry. So
Right.
it's tough to give advice on competitor research. I always tell people if you're doing it on your own, pick people who you know are either ranking for the keywords you want to rank with, or you just know them, like them, admire their business. Go to their website and do like a very quick content overview. What's working well for them? Maybe you like how they're talking about the services that they have, and you know you want to talk about your services similar. And what's not working? Like maybe you find that while they do a good job explaining their services, they have almost no interest on the about page because there's like
Mhm.
no personality, no story. The homepage is like convoluted and has way too many things on it. So take that information and allow it to inform how you would like your website to be. But whatever you do, do not let your competitors determine your approach for your own
Mhm.
website because it really, you should be standing out and not blending in.
Yeah. It's really funny because we take the same approach with clients when we're looking at how are we going to effectively run PR for you or social media. We look at their competitors' social media accounts. We look at their social media. We look at, okay, what are they doing really well against their competitors, or what are competitors doing better that could help them? And what are some best practices that we can weave into that? Or for the key messages, but I love that you're tying it into their SEO and their content writing, because that's another thing that we can add for them to say, and for your SEO and content writing, even if we're not handling that stuff, because we don't specialize in SEO, here's some things to consider. And
Yeah,
yeah. And then to your point, sometimes I find clients, they think they understand who they are, but then when we walk them through exercises and really hone in, they realize that their offering and who they want to sell to or who they want to speak to is a very different market.
totally, absolutely. Or what they'll find is that I've seen some of my clients come to me and say, I'm leaving the corporate world. It's very important to me. Like I've built a network of people who expect me to be a certain way. So I don't want, which is always funny because they always say, I don't want a personality packed website. I know that's all the rage on the internet. I just, I want to still keep that buttoned up appearance
Hmm.
and seem very professional. So then we'll do a little bit of the copy work together or outline or strategy, and they'll say, oh, I just don't think this feels like me. And the point is always, well, you're not in here, right? Like when we worked through the initial parts, you were like really so much was anxious about putting yourself into your copy. And I am definitely someone who doesn't want to force a certain type of copy on my clients. Like I do see a lot of things like get your personality in your copy. And to me, that's such a empty phrase, right?
Hmm.
Because like take an just a standard extrovert versus an introvert as an
Oh, yeah.
example. Most introverts are not going to be like, hey, what's up? Be my best friend, right? Like flashy and wild and crazy, because that's not how we're taught as a society or like consumers to think of those two different groups of people. So when you say put your personality on that, what if someone's personality is literally like cozy, stay at home, they love their pumpkin spice coffee and they love the season of fall, and that's their personality, just like the kind friend who shows
Hmm.
up and is always constant. You can put that into copy, right? Like
Hmm.
there are so many easy ways to just show up as the business owner who's going to be there, who's steady and confident and calm without being like kindergartner and too much candy or sorority girl, right?
Hmm.
Because that's what's done by knowing who you are. And that's what I mean by stand out, right? Like we all have certain quirks to us. It's funny I mention this because I've come to terms with the fact that I'm actually an introvert. I've always been pretty I think I'd appear extroverted. And so I thought I was because I like people and I'm very excitable. Like I kind of am that kindergartner on too much candy. That's my personality. But when I studied the two types of like personality distinctions, I realized my energy really does get drained when I'm, doing too many types of like events or speaking things at once. And I might need to retreat a little. So I think it's also questioning like, what does society say X, Y, and Z is? And then how do I know myself, know my business, or know how I'd like my business to appear online, and then step into that role, right?
Mhm.
And I'm fine stepping into the kindergartner and too much candy role in my own business because it feels good for me. But I can tell you for sure, some of those clients that I know that are a little anxious about being too personality driven and will describe themselves of wanting to be a little buttoned up in their copy,
Hmm.
there's great ways to still bring that personality in without seeming like the kindergartner on too much candy, right?
Mhm.
It's introducing that you have a confidence to yourself, or it's showcasing the experience you have so that people feel like excited to work with you because they automatically know you have the skills they need. That's ways to bring your personality in without being too flashy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'm just marinating on what you're saying. And I think that is something I also see with clients sometimes is um, they think of them like they're very academic or research driven as a nonprofit. And so everything on their website is very dry, very statistical, research driven, but they want consumers to come onto their website. So those are recommendations I make sometimes. It's like, well, actually, let's make your content really accessible. Let's make it something that the people that you're trying to reach will actually be able to read and understand at first glance.
Yeah, because it's really about the person who's making decisions. It's not so much what you write in your copy is not so much about who you are as a business owner and even not so much of how you want to appear. It's the type of people you want to work with when they consume the content or the copy that you create. How is that helping with the level of readiness to purchase or donate or whatever it is, as well as the level of awareness, right? Because you kind of have to know that sweet spot for both of those two things, right? Like, are they aware enough of your brand, your business, your nonprofit?
Mhm.
And if not, how can you educate them slightly so that it still feels natural? Similarly, mentioning the stats for as an example, like just in this case, you might want to put the stats out because you know that stats are like a proof of sorts, right? So, like, you might assume a consumer comes to your site, they see these stats, and they're like ready to go. But even if we're donating or even if we are just consuming content, you have to remember we are all human, right? And there's different types of consumer purchasers, right? Generally it falls into four categories, like really aware, quick to buy, really aware, slow to buy, and then the opposite of those two. So knowing your clients well enough to be able to that should determine the copy because you might have a fast buyer who is aware and you're throwing too many stats on them. You're making that page too long. You're
Mm.
potentially losing a sale or losing a client who is, I mean, I'm going to throw some air quotes on this, but like bored with your stuff because
Mhm.
you're not giving them an opportunity to buy. Like, they're here because they want to buy, they want to contact you, they want to donate. Vice versa, if you have someone who really does need to be nurtured, you need to create a lot of blog content for those people. You need to add those stats in. And I think stats are tricky because they're great. But quite often when it comes to copy, you need to explain why the stat's important.
Mm.
You can't just share them with people. And I see this happening a lot. You know, 20% of our clients do this, 40% do that. Well, what does that mean for the people who are reading? Like, it
Exactly.
sounds cool, but how will that work for them as the purchaser? Because we all, every single one of us, we all consume content thinking, what difference does this make for me?
Mhm.
And I think that's what people need to think about a little bit more when they write copy or they audit their own copy. Like, what does this mean for my clients or my leads?
Yeah, definitely. So, what about somebody who likes to write? They have a lot of copy, but they don't know how to implement it and how to properly like put it into their website or their socials and then implement SEO strategies. Because I think you're really demystifying the process of SEO here, which I don't think everybody who does SEO is good at.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
thank you. No, thank you.
Oh, well, no, that's a great question where you're going. And it's why I started to do what I call copy coaching in my business. Especially when I try to remind myself, and you brought this up earlier, which I think is helpful. Small business could be anything from like one person making $40,000 a year, or it could be, like 20 people team making like multi six figures a year. It's still technically a small business, depending on how they work and who they hire and all those things. Now, when we look at that and we look at the differences between that, we really want to consider things like that you might have that small business owner who doesn't have the budget to pay for a copywriter to come in and write their whole site for them, or doesn't have the budget to have someone do a whole sales campaign.
Mm.
So that's why they're choosing to DIY their own copy, and they might do a pretty good job. However, they might not have the marketing know-how to know, is it effective? Like, is it even going, like, are people going to read this and like it? So what I will do is when I work with clients like that, I'll get a whole draft. So I'll say, like, let's outline your site. You go and write it on your own and then bring it back to me. And we'll do a lot of collaborative editing. So what I see most often happen is that the flow is not correct in the way that they share their information. They might have written a bunch of great stuff, but it just doesn't make sense where it's organized. So sometimes it's as simple as just reorganizing it. And then once it's organized, there's a lot of transitions that might need to come in or calls to action that weren't included. So I am a big believer in small businesses being able to write their own stuff. Similarly, though, the bigger businesses that might have a budget, but they still want either like someone on their team to do the writing, or they're hanging on to it just because they love writing.
Mm.
Same thing goes. Like, write the copy itself. You can get it audited pretty cheaply, especially if that person's not going to be doing the writing or the editing themselves.
Mhm.
There are, like, I do this with my clients, and then there are other types of businesses, whether it's a website designer, a strategist, just a marketing strategist on their own, that could review your site or review your sales page and say, okay, here's what's not working. Consider making these changes, and then let you run off with it on your own. That's very financially, like, cheap, I would say, in order to get your marketing better. But from the SEO perspective, there's two approaches in the same thing. One, there's so many cheaper tools now than there was even 5 years ago to get SEO reports on your business. One of them's Uber Suggest. I think if you did the lifetime plan, it's like under $300 or $400 for the lifetime plan. Or you could do month to month, even if it's a new endeavor that you are
Oh.
doing as a business owner. Or there are so many types of SEO companies or SEO copywriters that offer SEO reviews, sometimes retainers. They'll work with clients, not necessarily doing the writing for them, because that's where it starts to get pretty expensive, but someone who can take reports of your SEOs every month, give you some strategy as to saying, this is working, this is not working, here's what you need to create and why. And then you, as the business owner, can go and write that content on your own because you're given the tools. Like, you're saying, here's the SEO keyword phrases you need to write content for. Here's the, like, adjustments you need to make to the pages. Go off and do it. And
Mhm.
then the responsibilities on the business owner. And, financially, it could be a really good decision to have someone help you in that way as well.
Yeah, wonderful. And so did you say one of the recommendations that you make is it called Uber Suggest?
Yeah, that's Neil Patel's company that he
Mm.
he started. He's always been, like, one of the
Oh,
top
yeah.
SEO guys, and it's not my favorite tool, I'll be honest, it's not my favorite, but the reason I recommend it to a lot of people is it's very friendly to use.
Ah.
So, a lot of my clients who might want to, maybe they hire me for website copy, so I'll get their website all set up, we'll do all the SEO strategy in our project together, but then they might choose to do the SEO going forward on their own, like, if they're
Mm.
writing their own blog content, let's say. Well, I'll suggest that to them because the tool itself is straightforward, it's helpful, and it's easy enough to read to start making decisions if you're not going to have someone guide the blog content for you.
Yeah, that's good to consider. So how hard is it to get on the on Google page one these days?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Um, you know, the an- I swear I am just going to get this tattooed on my forehead one day, but the answer is it depends, and I can help you understand how to parcel that answer out. So the answer is it's very hard, and the answer is also super easy, depending on the content you're creating. Now, let's say you are a landscaper, maybe, right? Because that's a local job. If you're focusing on local SEO and you live in a town that's big enough that there's a decent amount of people in it actually searching for things, but not a huge metropolis like New York City, as an example,
Mhm.
you might put in landscaper in Providence, let's say. And if you keep using those phrases within your copy, like tree removal in Providence or like lawn care in Providence, then you're going to have a lot easier of a chance to rank because your competition locally is low, but the people searching for it is high. So, small example of a local SEO. And again, this doesn't always work. Los Angeles is an example. There's a lot of people in Los Angeles. So you put photographer in Los Angeles, you're just fighting against a sea of photographers. So that's actually a great example of easy and hard, right? Depending on your circumstances. In the same regard, I love to suggest people look at long tail keywords. So what that is instead of saying wedding photographer, which would be a short tail keyword because it's only 2 words, they would want to try to rank, especially for blog content, for a longer phrase. Now, that phrase might be what to look for in a wedding photographer. That's kind of a long suggestion. Or how to hire a wedding photographer processes. So things like that, where the person who's searching for phrases like that actually really wants the answer. And you're doing it and using the phrase in a natural way throughout your copy. That's the key there, especially with Google's helpful change that they just made, that like how they're looking at content. They want it to be assistive and actually like think about the intent of the searcher. We really want to make sure that when we're using these longer tail keywords, we're doing it in a way that's natural in the content and helpful for our listeners and for podcasts, an example, or for our blog content readers. So if you are creating like maybe a wedding guide, like a photographer could create something like the best poses for family portraits, and that's their long tail keyword. People who are searching for that will find them much more easier. They have a much better chance of getting on Google page 1. And I try to tell people, the higher you rank for the more things that are all related, of course, the easier Google's going to want to move you up in the ranks compared to someone who's just jumping in. So go for those keywords that are only like, let's say 10 searches a month, because if those 10 searches are actually like people, you're answering their very specific question, then you're going to rank I'd say much easier for that 10 search phrase. Whereas, of course, you'd want like a 2,000 search per month, as an example keyword. But if you can keep getting those tiny keyword phrases on your site, you're going to, again, make it a lot easier for you to rank for something harder later on. And just overall, if you want to end up on Google page 1, make sure all of the content you're creating is related. If you are a wedding photographer, you don't all of a sudden want to start talking about how to run your business unless you have a whole separate arm of your company where you are advising wedding photographers. And in that regard, you might want 2 separate websites. So that way, you're getting the SEO benefits of both types of your company. But the clearer you can be for the search engines and the clearer you can be for the people who will read or consume your content otherwise, the better options that you have for getting recognized.
Nice. So then when somebody's completed their website, it launches, what's next? Is there a typical amount of time that people should focus on SEO, or have their team or an external contractor focus on SEO for their website to continue that marketing cycle?
Yeah, it depends. No, the answer to that is I would say the best case scenario, if you're really actually going to put the effort into SEO, you should always be focusing on it. Now, if it's just you on your team and you're not like, outsourcing any of this, then it could be as simple as you paying attention to your monthly SEO reports. If something is moving up, then maybe you improve it slightly so it, it has the better chance of continuing to move up. If you see something going down in rank, give it a little review and say, why is this going down in rank? Is there any way you can improve it at that way? When it comes to outsourcing, then I would say you definitely want to hire a company that is giving you strategy, not just reports. I see this all the time and it drives me bananas. A lot of people will hire SEO companies, and I feel like what some of the companies do is they regurgitate information that they could have easily been found on their own, but they're not providing that strategy of, what do I do with this information? How do I better my business with this information? And when you're outsourcing your SEO, the main reason you're doing it is for the strategy. Like, there's so many decisions that go into why the keyword would be better than another keyword, or why you would start testing keywords, especially if one was performing okay. At what point do you know is a safe point to not lose traffic, yet to start making tests to see what's better? an average consumer who doesn't understand SEO doesn't know that. So if you're going to pay for SEO, you want to make sure you're hiring someone who can make those strategic decisions for you. And then if you're asking me about ranking, the easiest way to answer that question is it could take some time for any new page or post to get indexed. A lot of the times what you'll hear in the online world is 3 to 9 months it could take for your post or your page to get
Wow.
indexed and move up the ranking in Google. And a lot of everyone says that, oh, wow, that's a lot. But, you really need to think of SEO as a long-term thing that you do in your business. There are short-term gains, and everyone loves short-term gains because you're able to see immediate results from them. And the best way to kind of sum up this right now is, pre-pandemic, there were tons of sourdough bakers out there writing recipes and sharing guides on how to make a sourdough starter. And they were getting very small views on their websites. Like they were getting views that were people who are already knew about sourdough bread,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Then the pandemic comes, and I really need to check this fact because I share this stat all the time, and I could be so wrong. But I swear, when I read this originally in like 2020 or like early 21, I think there was a 9,000% increase of traffic to phrases like that. Like, can you imagine what a 9,000% increase to any blog on your
Yeah.
website would be for your business? That could completely change your life, right? Not even just change your business like slightly, it could change your entire life to have 9,000% more traffic to it, like to one page.
Yeah.
Now, as an example, maybe this sourdough company actually sold starters, which is a normal thing. It sounds really weird. If you don't know about bread, basically it's just like a small dough that you can use to start making other types of bread. Now, if you sell starters on your website and someone comes and they're like, how to make a starter, they realize that just to make a starter, it's weeks of process that you have to go through. And they're like, oh gosh, I don't want to do this, but I do want to try my hand at baking bread. And you sell a starter for $10, $15, 9,000% more traffic to that
Right.
$10 product
Yeah.
is absolutely incredible.
Yes.
So try to think of SEO with like that story in mind. Like you're doing this with your business's longevity in mind, and someone could find a post. And those sourdough people, like they might have written that post in 2014. And then in 2020, that's when it was really
Yeah.
like became a big trend and people found it. So think like, what is the longevity of my business? What do I want to do to serve my clients better, to help them more? And then you need to let that ride and then see how you can improve it over time and how it could potentially, improve your own business over time.
Mm. And now I'm just thinking about sourdough bread and
Right?
my local Buy Nothing group on Facebook, and somebody was like making sourdough bread and offering it up to people. And it was just such a special time. But I love
Yes.
that what you're saying about the process of making it actually isn't easy. And it's something that these companies, it could change their lives and their livelihood. And I
Yeah.
100% believe that that is the correct statistic based on
Yeah.
just knowing.
No, I really do think it was 9,000, but every time I say it, it seems so like ridiculous, right? That it would be such a huge jump in traffic, but I am pretty positive that I have gotten this one right. And
Yeah.
even I'm hearing what you just said is that like um people in your local group are doing this, and it is such a process to make one. Well, I did make my own sourdough starter, and I can tell you it takes a solid 2 weeks of very careful attention. Now, people don't want to put in that effort, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, this is not a judgment statement. But when we're trying new things, or doing things that we've done many times, we all want easy outs, which is why people like get frustrated with their website copy or they
Mm.
get frustrated with their SEO because we just, especially if we have something in our mind, like we know how we want our business to appear. So why can't we just write that copy, right? Like it
Mhm.
seems so frustrating. And that's why people love things like templates or swipe files because that's the easy out. But if you look at the local group and getting the sourdough starter and going through that experience, or if you did it on your own, you know that there really is kind of a beauty in it. Like at the end of my sourdough starter making, I named my starter. Her name was Stella. Like I felt like a little baby because I paid such careful attention to her, my starter. And like it felt like, I was also pretty proud of myself because prior to that, like I'm not known for my, like baking skills or anything. And I've never done it. So
Mm.
once I was able to successfully make a starter, keep it alive, I felt cool. Like I
Yeah.
felt proud of myself. So if you look at SEO from that same lens,
Mhm.
it's the same thing. Like you might not see the fruits of your labor right away, but when you start seeing that traction and know that you did it yourself, it's kind of like gamifying your
Yeah.
marketing, right? Like, okay, how can I do that again? Let's write another blog post. So like the motivation builds slowly and the wins might be slowly, but it will absolutely serve you for the long term of your business.
Mm. Now, speaking about kids, you are what we now call a mompreneur, as am I,
Yep.
because you do have kids and you started this business, right, with a newborn at home?
Yes, yes. I have 3 children. My oldest is a junior in high school. He is my stepson. So when
Mm.
I met him, he was 4 and he has lived with me almost full time ever since. So I started working in content marketing when he was tiny. And when I left my last traditional employed job and decided to work for myself, my middle child was under a year old at that
Mm.
point.
Wow.
Um, I was so lucky that I was able to work remotely part-time during that last traditional
Mm.
job, as well as my husband. So that child, the middle child, had never been to daycare or anything like that, just from the way our schedules aligned. So, I'll be honest with you. I remember when I was going to start my own company, I was like, oh yeah, I've done this. Like I've worked with Caroline Home forever. Like we're cool. Like I know what I'm doing. And it's a lot different to run your own business and have little babies at home. But I did it again. I mean, I after that second child, I had my third and final child in 2018. And in some ways, I will tell everyone it is such a blessing to run a business while also having my children home with me.
Mhm.
When I was younger, I always said I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also wanted to have a career
Yeah.
because I love work and I love strategy and I get very excited about the work that I do, but I also really like my family and my kids. So I just really thought like there's no way to actually combine those two worlds. And I I will never try to tell anyone it's not hard because it is hard.
Mhm.
But I think it's just such a blessing. Like it's probably one of the biggest blessings in my life that I was able to have a career that fulfills me and excites me and also hold my babies during their naps because they weren't sleeping or feed my kids who were on bottle strikes and
Mm.
while I was at home with them, like it is hard and easy at the same time. It is just something I'm so fortunate for.
Amazing. So what is next for you and your brand?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm kind of in the process of slowly growing right now. I have just recently onboarded a few contract writers on my team who are transitioning themselves, kind of like I did, from the content world into the
Mhm.
copywriting world.
Mm.
So that's actually been so fun for me because I wanted to be a writer and a teacher as a
Yep.
kid, right? So
Very
here I am kind of like teaching my own teammates at this point. And I really shied away from this for a while. I didn't think I'd ever really want to be an agency owner, and I'm still a little on the fence of what that looks like for my own business, but it's been really fun to have people that feel like colleagues again. I think the biggest thing I missed from my traditional job was like that, not necessarily the water cooler chat, but the brainstorming that you do with people who
Mm.
do the same things as you. So now, for example, I've been trying to bring all of my writers in on all of my projects and show them, like, okay, here's how I approach copy in this way. I'm not sure what to say in this section, but this is the like mission of the section, let's say. Like, this is the point I want to make. And even sometimes I hear them make a point that I wouldn't consider. And, I don't have a big head, but I've been doing this a long time. So it's really cool to hear someone else kind of like show you something that like just glazed right over what I was thinking and was better. So I do think the quick answer is I think that I am growing a little bit more of an agency here and eventually in the future I will onboard some staff to work with me and work with my clients. I still have my youngest home with me right now. This is
Mm.
probably her last year. We do a homeschool preschool program. Next year she'll actually probably be in the school system. So maybe next year I start to grow. This year at this point is just trying to like maintain my life and not sink this ship. But I see that long term I will probably be working with people and growing the business slightly.
Wonderful. I know that push pull. I became an accidental agency owner because I kept bringing in clients and I was like, okay, I need to start adding team members. And then it just grew into this whole business.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, you have to think about all the other things that you don't factor in once you start working like that? And are they going to be employees? Are they going to be contractors? Do I add benefits? Like,
Mhm.
are they in different state? All of that stuff that comes into the complexities nowadays of having virtual teams and figuring
Yeah,
out.
the logistics. In some
Mm.
ways, the logistics scare me a little less because of working in HR, right? So, like, I know how to
Mm.
manage employees and in a way that feels personal, but yet like manager like, if like there's some like air quotes on that. What I think that makes me nervous as the business owner, especially as a service provider type of business, is I get a huge portion of my clients from referrals. Like, most of my clients will come to me because I've worked with a friend or a colleague of theirs. And in that, which is wonderful. I love referral based businesses. But I think there's a trust level that they're working with Erin, right? So one thing I haven't really wrapped my brain around is how am I growing in a way that they still feel that confidence that they get. I feel like this is a sounds conceited, and I mean it in the least conceited way, right? But it's like, how do I give my clients the overall customer experience that makes me feel good as a business owner, that still lights me up, right? Because I still want to work with my clients and do the job, but also bring on people that adds to the customer experience, like adds to the value that they're getting in a way that my clients feel secure with, because, it being that referral business. So that's the part of growth where I think I'm experiencing right now, like the how. And
Yeah.
I think once I move past that, then those logistics will like kind of more naturally fall into play, right?
Right.
But I think one thing that I wish people talked about more in this online business world is the fact that like growth is not necessarily like a linear path. Like there are years that I have worked little and my finances have skyrocketed. There are years that I've worked so hard and then my finances are so low, right? And then there are years where I'm trying something that I never thought I'd try. And not that that's related to finances, but it's like, boy, is there a lot to learn. Like, I'm working towards 7 years in business right now. Like, mentally, I feel like I shouldn't be learning anymore. Mentally, I feel like I should be a professional, right? So
Mm.
over 6 years in business, I should know everything. Let me tell you, I am the type of person who likes to be as transparent as possible. I do not know everything, and that is totally okay. And I really hope anyone who is listening to this like remembers that for their own business. Every new phase you enter in your business, even if it's marketing related, every new marketing phase,
Yeah.
you have to learn and grow through it. And that's great. And do it your own way. And just remember that, like, it's a lot of what's sold to us online is that we need to be an expert at everything. I say be an expert at what you're best in and then just grow as you can, whether it's slow growth, fast growth, whatever feels right for you. But don't beat yourself down about that growth period, because it is totally normal and totally necessary too, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Erin, what's the best way for people to find you and on social and your website and learn more about potentially working with you?
So come on over and listen to my podcast. I know we're here on podcast land right now.
Yes.
So after we're done this episode, come on over. I am at Talk Copy to Me. It is a marketing and copywriting podcast. And I will tell people it is not just about like what to say. It is very widely approached. Like one episode that we've done recently is copy and membership. So
Mm.
you have a memberships. What do you need when it comes to the marketing? What do you need in the inside of the membership when you communicate with your clients? So it's a really well-rounded marketing show, and we have so many really interesting experts that come on. Other than that, you can find me at erinollila.com. Google will totally help you out if you don't know how to spell that. And I'm on Instagram as well at Erin Ollila.
Wonderful. And is there a favorite quote, mantra, verse that you live
Yeah.
by that motivates you?
Yeah, I'm not going to know who to attribute this to, but when I was a kid, I went to a conference. I was actually in the Future Educators Club in high school, and someone at the conference said, "Good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good becomes better and your better becomes best." Don't know why that popped in my mind. It does. I think of it often enough, but like I really think it's nice to just. It's part of the growth of what I just said, right? Like, you try, you succeed, you fail, you learn from it, and you just hold yourself to it, not necessarily in like the hustle culture, but hold yourself to growth. So that way you're learning at all times and bettering yourself, whether it's your business or just bettering yourself as a human.
Mm, that is beautiful. Thank you, Erin, for coming on and giving us some really great usable tips for SEO and also for thinking about how you're messaging, how you're creating your business, how you're approaching it, not, I mean, and I think what you're saying resonates not just with copy, but all aspects of marketing and PR. Think about your market differentiation and all of those things. And I love that what you said about long tail versus short tail, and remembering SEO is a long-term play. I think people forget about that. Just like with PR, they want those quick hits. Sometimes they
Yeah.
come, sometimes they don't. But ultimately, it's a long play. It's about increasing your visibility overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yes. And I'll make sure to put your link to your podcast in our show notes as well for our listeners.
All right,
Um,
great.
yeah. So thank you all to our listeners for coming back for another week of Your Brand Amplified. And I will be back again next week with another amazing guest giving you actionable tips for your PR marketing strategies.